lot of the pictures that our fans have sent in with the hashtag LCS. Trevor there with a selfie. Whose selfie game is more on point, yours or Trevor's?
Please.
Please. Well, it's the European LCS we're talking about here, and the race in the playoffs, of course, to get to the finals here in the quarterfinal between H2K and Giants. And has been brought to match point already by H2K. Game 3 is just moments away. Let's look at the matchup so far, starting with the game we just saw. Another extremely convincing game by H2K. Let's get the picks and bans up on stage, on the screen, rather, again, to refresh our memory.
So yeah, different approach for Giants. Game 1, absolutely no crowd control or engage whatsoever. Maybe a little bit of peel. So this time they take a different swing and they say, okay, we're gonna go for full-on skirmish. You know, Vayne, Braum, okay, Victor is still a control mage, Gragas and Shannon all looks nice on paper, but you still have to play the game right. And it kind of went downhill. It doesn't even matter what H2K pick at this point because they're just playing the game smarter. We can take the graphic down and just start talking about the early game, the lane swap.
Right, and I like the adaptations, but as you said, it's all on the execution. That lane swap that came out, we were kind of looking at this 2v2 setup between the Sivir, the Alistair, the Vayne and Braum, and as you alluded to, lane swap comes out. H2K, they, you know, it ends up in that top lane kill. There's still playing us out on this one. It's
yeah, they want to give you tunes to give you analysis here. Stress,
liven
but yeah,
up the show.
TLDR. Lane swaps, you do try to do the 3-man defense against the 4-man siege that's coming out. Lately it's become a 3-man, but there's still always the 4th man around to combat that. Giants actually did this against H2K the first time they faced off. I believe it was week 2. Didn't work. Tried it again, ended up giving up first blood. Shen went down and Oduwabna picked it up, I believe, and then he immediately teleported down, soaked up that half the wave that was remaining on the tower, and that in a normal strategic match should be a game over already. Fell behind, lost more ground, eventually tried a couple of skirmishes, got some kills, but it was clear that Giants were outmatched by H2K, so what is next? Yeah,
what is next? To take a closer look at maybe one of the moments that snowballed it again in that Game 2 replay of a skirmish that H2K initiated at the end. Well, it could have been something in there for Giants who actually initiated this one, but they didn't play it out correctly.
Yes, this was right after the Kasing double pulverized to catch 2, and this is Giants, as Deficio was talking about. Why would he be diving an Alistair at this point? It's just so very messy and very headless when it comes to decision making.
Yeah, what preluded this play was an attempt of a pickoff by Giants. So they tried to find an opening with that Vayne and the Braum combo, slow somebody down. But Godfrey didn't even use his exhaust. Exhaust goes through. Sivir's shield could have slowed Sivir down. Maybe they could have gotten a pick, but because they didn't quite get it off, they were chasing a loss. They was like, okay, we didn't get it out. We have to keep going. There's no other way. We just screwed up, so let's keep going. Let's keep diving. And they ended up diving. And Alistair, and it seems like they're a little bit tilted right now. And if you look at how it's going on H2K side, everybody played that perfectly. Kasing is tanking, Lulik's mechanics were on point, you know, kick, follow-up, Q, follow-up. Everything was played crisp and clean there in that dive, and it just shows H2K is much more comfortable on the stage right now than Giants.
Yeah, H2K is way ahead of the race in this one. One thing for Giants, though, at least they didn't just let it go when they started getting behind. They built in a little pause, didn't take very long, and then tried to skirmish. At least they had crowd control on all their champions now, and there was an adaptation. It just drives me to wonder, in this series, it might just be that the individual skill is just too high from the side of H2K. Right?
Perhaps a little bit, but H2K getting away with a lot of things in these games when it comes to, you know, H2K aren't playing perfectly. Sometimes they're a little bit caught out of position, going for Baron when they're quite low. Giants just aren't able to capitalize on it, whether it's, you know, from their warding not being too good or pushing too deep to try and get deep wards when, quite frankly, they can't. Giants just aren't reading H2K's mistakes at the right time, and H2K aren't getting punished.
Well, we'll see if they'll be able to read them a little bit more as we go into the next game. First, though, earlier we asked which role you thought would have the biggest impact on the playoffs, and it's Jackie writes, I think the coaches will have a massive impact on the playoffs because of the extra preparation time and the multiple games in a series. Extra preparation time for sure, but indeed that coach on stage in between series being to, well, talk you up a little bit and get you out of maybe a hole when you're tilted.
Yeah, obviously coaches becoming more and more important over time right now, and compared to last year, compared to 2 years before, just the role they serve within a team and an organization has gone up. And I'm just really eager to see how much that changes for playoffs later on, for Worlds, and how these coaches are gonna, you know, renew pick and bans, you know, read enemy teams, find patterns and exploit that. So far, we don't really see any strategic depth because H2K's basic level play is just already ahead of the Giants, but maybe as we progress in the tournament, we might see some interesting reads, especially picks and bans.
Picks and bans and maybe mid-series substitutions. Now that we're talking about coaches, and H2K has actually elected to be making a mid-series substitution, placing Betongjocke in place of Lulex for Game 3. Super interesting all around. Quite excited about this, to see a team doing this. And you actually know Betongjocke very well from the Challenger Series.
Yes, he was playing on Denial for the first 3 weeks and a couple of games here and there later for the Challenger Series. Betongjocke is a jungler that, come the summer split, the beginning of it, nobody in competitive play really had seen him performing. He was from solo queue. A lot of highly rated solo queue players in Challenger regarded him as a fairly strong jungler. Came onto the scene with Denial, started looking pretty good, but the one thing we never really saw was how he could play with a team that had a lot of time to practice when it comes to with a coach, macro level strategy at the highest level, because his time on Denial, a lot of it was to do with how the team was split pushing. He played Gragas, Rek'Sai, Lee Sin, so fairly standard. I don't think in Challenger we saw enough of what Betongjocke has to offer. Maybe we'll see that from his time with H2K now.
But we always have to put this in perspective. This does not mean that Lulex is out, Betongjocke is in. I really think we need to lose the notion that teams are only 5 players and a coach, and if you look over at Korea, even Faker gets substituted sometimes. So that doesn't mean Faker's out and Easy Hoon is in 100% suddenly. And I really like that H2K is making this adaptation. I would like to see more teams at least consider it. Bring subs to the venue. You know, maybe one of your players starts playing a little worse. Maybe you're so far up in a series that you can comfortably make this decision to put in a fresh player that hasn't played on this stage, completely new, straight into a playoff game. But because they're 2-0 up, because their macro level play is ahead, because their shot caller is still in the game, they can now test out a new member, and they just have more variables to play with should they go into the semifinal and eventually into Worlds.
Yeah, I applaud it. Definitely just the use of bringing those different players in there and the different flavor. We'll see what it brings to Game 3, which could be match point for H2K. And we're going to revisit, well, some of the things that we've been watching beforehand, starting with our featured matchup in the top lane, Werlib versus Odoamne. Odoamne, well, he's gotten rolling, but his whole team has.
Right, his whole team has. And to be honest, when you look over at the Giants side, their stats have just not been impressive at all in the last 2 games. First game didn't even pick up a kill. And you can see, while the stats aren't too huge on their own, we're looking at 2 games from this sample size from this very series. And Werlib, he's been behind, as we've seen from previous games when it comes to kills. Odoamne's been up in kills as standard, but you look at the last game, there was a massive CS difference because of the early game and how it affected Werlib's ability on that Shen to actually get farm. And if that happens again, this is going to be a 3-0.
I mean, we're looking at both games. Both games, the lane swap initiated or happened. Let's just say lane swap happened. H2K came out ahead. Odoamne came out ahead both times in CS lead. The time it takes for Werlib to catch on, Odoamne is doing different things, pressuring the map, pressuring H2K, pressuring in Giants rather, and giving that vision that H2K plays so well with.
Yeah, super interesting in that one. And also with the new jungler coming in on the side of H2K, yes, you could say maybe it will be tricky in terms of the communication of him. When is he coming top lane the gank? But on the other side, Frederick probably has no idea. Of course, we have no idea how much they've been scrimming against each other with this lineup, but it's also a new factor thrown in there for Giants to deal with.
Right, but one thing that we do know on H2K's side, this substitution or the potential one has kind of been looming. He got added to their roster a few weeks back, and we know they've been scrimming with him. So I expect H2K at this point to actually be somewhat settled. Those, what is he going to do around the map? I expect the macro level play to actually be not too far off what has been going on with Lulex, especially in the last couple of weeks.
Well, we will see what happens. The teams are set on stage, so we're going to head it over to the casters and take us into game